All right. All right, so we're going to be still solving equations by factoring, but these are all going to be either the sum or the difference of cubes. And so before we start solving those, I do want to review the quadratic formula. Do you guys remember the song? A. Good. All right, so jot that down if you don't remember it, because you're going to need it on every single problem today. All right, so we're going to practice a couple quadratic formula problems, and then we'll get to the new stuff. Okay, so over on the side, I'm going to write what A, B, and C are. So A is going to be the coefficient of x squared, which in this case is 1. B is the coefficient of x, which is 4. And C is going to be that last number, which is 16. All right, so x equals the opposite of b, so negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 4 squared, minus 4ac divided by 2a. Now, your calculator can do a lot of this for you. So you wouldn't type in the square root, but you would type in what's underneath it. So not the square root, just 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 16. And you should get negative 48. Okay. And then anytime we have a negative underneath the square root, we're going to pull out an I. And then we're going to think about it like positive 48. That's under there. And then yesterday, we only really squares we had to worry about were 4 and 9. Today, we are going to have to think about some bigger squares. But the largest square that's going to divide into, bless you, 48 is going to be 16. 48 is 16 times 3. Okay. And then we're going to find the square root of 16, which is 4. All right. And then we still have one more thing to do. So we are going to look at all of these numbers that are not under a square root and see if we can reduce them all by something. Can you? Can you reduce them all by 2? Yeah, so it's going to be negative 2 plus or minus 2i squared of 3. So we're going to have to do something similar to that on every problem today. So that's why today there's only 4 on your assignment. Yesterday there was 8 because they just didn't take as long to do. Okay, let's do one more quadratic formula and then we'll get to the sum and difference of cubes. All right. So we're just going to list out our coefficients and our constant for A, B, and C. Oh, sorry. Okay. All right, so let's put it in the quadratic formula. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root. B squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Okay, so when you guys are doing these on your own, you would, in your calculator, type this in, negative 2 inside parentheses squared outside minus 4 times 1 times 4, and you would get negative 12. And because it's a negative, you're going to pull out an I. And once you pull out the I, it's not negative anymore. So you start thinking about what squares go into positive 12. What do y'all think? 4. Good. It's going to be 4 times 3. Okay. And then the square root of 4 is 2. And then we have one last step where we see if we can reduce all of those numbers. We can. We can reduce them all by 2. So this middle part of the notes is exactly the same thing as yesterday. Like I just cut and pasted it from yesterday's notes to put it in the middle. And so we still, first thing, we want to get everything on one side, 0 on the other. That's already done for all of these, so that's okay. That's one step we don't have to do. Then we're going to factor. And today's lesson, these are going to be the sum and difference of cubes when we factor. So anytime you want to, if you guys want this guy out while you're working, go ahead and get it out. I mean, I don't know if you guys have these formulas memorized or not. That will probably be helpful for you. But when we're doing the sum and difference of cubes, you do a small set and a big set. And you're going to find each cube root. And so A is going to be the cube root of x cubed, which is just x. And B is going to be the cube root of 125, which is, what do y'all think? The cube root of 125 is 5. So if you had your sheet in front of you, you just put in X for A and 5 for B. Or what I could just bring those over with whatever sign is there in the small set. Then you're going to square the first one, change the sign, multiply them together. And the last sign is always a plus, and then square the 5. Right. Now, the sum and difference of cubes work out very similarly every time. So the x plus 5 equals 0 is going to be really easy to solve. But the x squared minus 5 plus 25 equals 0, we're going to have to do the quadratic formula on every one of these. Okay. So for this first one, we'll just subtract 5. So one of our answers is just -5. Right? And then for the other answer, we're going to do the quadratic formula. So x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Okay. So then when you guys are doing this on your own, you will just do this without the square root in your calculator. And every time on the sum and difference of cubes, it's going to be negative every time. It's just how the pattern works out. So that means every one of these sum and difference of cubes, you're going to have to pull out an I. And every time, there is going to be a square that goes into that number. Right. Now, the square that goes into 75 is 25. It's 25 times 3. Okay. And then last step is to, well, one of the last steps, take the square root of 25, just 5. Right? And then you're going to look at these numbers that aren't underneath a radical. Can you reduce them all by the same thing? No. So this would be your answers. -5 and then all that stuff. Okay. All right, we're going to do one more, and then you guys are going to have some time to work on some by yourself. Okay, so number 4 is going to be the difference of cubes. A is going to be the cube root of 8x cubed. What do y'all think? 2x, good. And B is going to be the cube root of 1. Which is 1. I guess there's a lot of A's and B's in today's assignment. You use A's and B's for this part, and then you use A, B's, and C's for the next part. So anyway, we're going to bring down those roots we just found with the sign of the problem. Then we're going to square 2x, so square the 2 and the x. Change the sign, multiply them together. Uh-oh. The last sign is always a plus sign, and then we're going to square the 1.
Where'd you get 4x?
I squared 2x because that's the formula. So the cubes formula for different, you know what I'm talking about? All right. So now we're going to do what we've been doing. So set each factor equal to 0. Bless you. You're welcome. Okay. One of these is going to be fairly simple to solve. We're just going to add the 1 and divide by 2. All right, the other one, we're going to have to do the quadratic formula. Okay, so we need to figure out what 2 squared minus 4 times 4 times 1 is. That's going to be negative 12. Hopefully that doesn't surprise you, because every time you're doing this with the sum or difference of cubes, that's going to be negative. So we're going to pull out an I. And every time you do this with sum and difference of cubes, there's going to be a square that goes evenly into that number. In this case is going to be 4. All right. We'll find the square root of 4, which is just 2. Bless you. Thanks. All right, then we're going to reduce. So all those numbers can be reduced by 2. Now, another thing you might notice, like as you're doing these sum and difference of cubes problems, is you're always at some, like you're going to be, you're going to have the square root of 3. So every one of these, you'll have the square root of 3 in your answer. Just something to keep in mind. All right, so your assignment is on the back.